Good morning and welcome to our today's tutorial. This builds up on the previous tutorials where we already programmed the automatic operation of this machine using the touch panel, the control panel down here. Just pressing the start push button is going to lead to a sequential operation of different steps from this machine. Today we want to add an HMI, a touch panel. You can see one of those in the back here, for example, a touch panel acting similar as a smartphone, for example. You have just a touch screen with different buttons. Home button, boop, going to lead to home, extend cylinder, retract cylinder, vacuum on, and so on. And you can also see the status, for example, vacuum is on, good. Using an HMI. Not going to use the cell phone here, but hardware installed HMI made by Siemens. So looking similar than this. Looking pretty much like this little beauty here. Semantic HMI, touch panel, and that's a comfort panel using touch. So really a touch screen. And you can see, for example, this button here is going to turn off a screw motor. This is going to retract a gripper. This is going to open a gripper. This is going to lead back wherever, and so on. So this is going to be the end result of today. Controlling this machine, for example, extend this traverse, meaning this traverse cylinder is going to travel to the right position here. Retract traverse is going to the left position. Turn on vacuum is going to turn on a vacuum, and so on. All these operations should happen in on a button press, and they could also destroy, meaning if you have two cylinders, if you extend this, there's not a problem. If you retract this, there's no problem. If you extend this, no problem. Retract, no problem. But if you extend this and then extend this, they bump into each other, finger broken. That should not happen in automatic operation. That should only happen in setup mode, meaning a restricted mode for the not for the machine operator, the one that presses push buttons all day, but for the maintenance guy or for the technician that maybe repairs and execute maintenance at the machine. So that's why we need a setup mode. We can also say only give access to this using a password, for example, or a key, whatever. So setup mode. To do this, we are using a TIA portal again and a sub-software called WinCC. This was in older times an additional software to the Semantic Manager software, external software, but now it's integrated into the TIA portal. We can get access to this software when we add a new device, and we do not want to add a controller. We not want to add an PLC again. We already have a main PLC controlling our machine. We want to add an HMI. And I only have semantic basic panels here. Those basic panels are pretty much, in this case, not touch panels. They only have the push buttons on the bottom. But I'm just going to show you how to program a touch panel. I only have the software for basic panels here on this PC. That's why I can only add basic panels, but I can still program them as if they were the comfort panels. Gonna add a 9-inch display. We can choose between landscape mode or portrait mode. I prefer landscape mode for the operation that we have here. Depending on your customer or whoever you're programming for, maybe yourself, then it's your likings. You can choose between one of those modes. You can also choose other screens. This is dependent on the hardware you have. I have this hardware here right now. Can change the name of the device. Since I have called the PLC main PLC, I'm going to call this main HMI. HMI. So main HMI. And on the bottom left here, we can see Start Device Wizard is activated. This activates a device wizard that helps you with setting up the machine, setting up everything that you need to do. You could also deactivate it, but for the first time you do this, please, or also for later times, actually, it's really helpful. Activate it, and we'll see what the wizard can do for us. So if I press OK, the wizard's going to start and gives us several options. It always takes some time for the visit to start. There's a little fruit fly here that's annoying. I'm sorry for that, but that needed to go. So, and it's still here actually. The wizard always needs some time to start. Where are we? Come on, wizard. Yeah. Depending on your PC. So the wizard, in contrast to the not wizard, just gives us opportunities to have stuff set up automated. For example, the PLC connection, as we have it here, the PLC connection is the connection that the HMI needs. It highly needs one because the HMI is not intelligent. It does not store data. It does not work with data. It just shows data and you can put in data. It cannot calculate anything. That's why it needs a brain. So that's just like your sensors, like your fingers, for example, and your eyes. They cannot do something per se. They can just transfer data to your brain. So I need a brain connection. The brain we already have here is the main PLC in this case. And this is how they are connected, a green cable, a Profinet cable. We could also have a connection through Profibus, for example, but the HMI, this HMI in this case only supports Profinet. Could have, for example, Profibus as well, but we only have the networking option here. Next, you would need to set up this connection, for example, manually with IP addressing and so on when you do not use the wizard. So please use the wizard. Next thing is the general screen layout. First thing, screen resolution is pretty much set because this is what we have, and the background color. Disadvantage when choosing a dark background color is you have too high contrast. You have, like, this could hurt your eye. You concentrate on a white bubble on this screen there, and this white bubble basically burns into your eye, and the rest is just too dark and hurts your eyes. So too big contrast is not good. Also with white, this just hurts your eyes after a while. Also, please do not choose yellow or red as colors, because yellow and red are reserved for warnings and errors, and like neon colors are also pretty bad because they hurt the eyes of the operator that stares at this maybe 7 hours a day. So a neutral color is always good. We can choose a header, can choose a logo. For example, I do not have a logo. If I would have one, I would browse and just select one. Do not have one, and I want the time of the day shown on the bottom, on the top right. The thing is, the HMI is not smart. It does not have any idea which time it is. It gets this data also from the PLC. The rest in the header, you can see the rest in the header is this white bar on the top, which is a navigation bar. It just shows the current screen, the current room you're in on your HMI. So I'm going to leave that activated. So alarms. Alarms are, for example, if your PLC and your HMI, they're communicating, right? They're communicating. If the PLC cable is disconnected from the HMI, the Profinet cable, the HMI is going to realize that, right? It's going to realize that I lost my brain. I lost my. Well, how do you realize you lost your brain? But still, it's going to say, I lost my brain. The HMI knows, and through one of those alarms, it's going to tell you. It's going to tell you, yeah, my brain is gone. I do not have a connection to the PLC anymore. That's why those alarms are pretty important. And there are other things. You could program those. For example, this cylinder is extended. This cylinder is extended. There's an error. This should not happen in the system. That's an alarm. Here, please do something. You could program those alarms. So for now, we just leave them all activated, and we can add alarms later to our system. So next would be screen layout. Here you can create your hierarchy of your screen. The first thing you see is you only have a root screen, which is your home screen. This is where you start. One screen means really one setup of this, right? Meaning here on the first screen you just have a hello world. Then you click a button, boop, go to the second screen, then the second screen pops up. And this one is then responsible for HMI, for the manual mode, for example. So I have the root screen, which says hello world in our case. I'm going to have one manual mode. And in parallel to the manual mode, I want to have an automatic mode. In parallel means they are not active at the same time, but they are all both accessible from the root screen on. So in the root screen, there's going to be one button that leads me to the automatic mode. In the automatic mode, there's one button back that leads me to the root screen. Here again, I have one button for the manual mode. It goes to the manual mode and back to the root screen. So this is how we can navigate. We can also make the hierarchy a little bit deeper, but I do not want to go there right now. Next. System screens, for example, project information, user administration, system information, and others. This is called system screens that are pre-programmed, predefined screens from the HMI on. For example, project information, if you have a programmer there, if you have a program name, a date when this program was downloaded, version, this can all be put into the project information. If you have limited access, so only your maintenance is allowed to access the HMI, the full manual mode, the setup mode. No, wait a second, we are there. Then only the logged in user can do that, and you can administer those users in this screen. System information, for example, which PLC type, how long has the system running, how much memory is in usage, how much CPU's power, how much CPU time is now active, whatever that's called. This could all be found in the system information, and so on, for version number, for example, of the hardware, and so on. In our case, we do not need them all. We don't need any of those. We can add them later if we want. Buttons are those little buttons here on the bottom. Those little buttons on the bottom. If I click on them, they are going to be deselected from my project. If I click on them here, they are going to be added to my project. Those two buttons are always helpful. Exit closes the runtime, meaning the project that we are programming right now is going to be closed, and we are back at the initial setup of the HMI, which is usually a Windows running, really a Windows running where you can access the system information, the system settings, everything that you can usually access in a Windows. So I'm going to leave that on. Maybe you need to change the IP address, then you have to close the runtime, boop, and change the IP address in the system settings, as in all Windows. The start screen just brings us back to the root screen. We are not going to program in different languages. We're not going to have users right now. That's why I leave those two deactivated. Now I would have to choose which buttons do we actually need. But I only need those 8 buttons. So I cannot click on next, I can only click on finish. If I click now finish, the HMI is going to be added to our project. On the left side in the project tree, you can see the HMI is added next to our PLC. So now that the HMI is added, this in the middle here, now this window here, and on the right here, the toolbox, this is WinCC Flexible. This is WinCC Flexible, and now we can actually work with or everything that we have with different elements. If we just want to create a nice picture or something, I can, for example, add circles, I can add pictures, I can add texts, and so on. This is like PowerPoint, for example, pretty easy to use. Those are basic objects. Elements are a little bit more difficult. I'm going to get to those in a second. Controls are also, for example, user view, user administration, system diagnostics, and so on. Everything not covered in this topic right now. Also written here is runtime and simulation. If you click on this, and if I click here now on top, on start simulation, this HMI would pop up in my PC. I can do that for now. Let's see. I hope it does not take too long. Sometimes it could take too long. There it is. So that's the simulation. You can see there were some errors. There were some startup errors, and I can have a look. Alarms, nothing, right? No alarms anymore. No communication loss or something. I can click buttons, and you can see there's nothing in this HMI right now, right? Nothing, except for a welcome text. Welcome to HMI. Okay, manual mode. Manual mode. Oh no. If I close the runtime, I'm going to go back to my Windows, basically, right? So I'm going to go back to this. The second button we have here is start the runtime. A runtime starting would Need to turn that off, sorry. Offline. Wait, I'm sorry for this. The runtime button here starts the runtime. The runtime is if you are not using an HMI, like a physical HMI, you can also use a PC and have the HMI just simulated on the PC itself, right, on the PC, and leave it just running there for 24 hours a day, just on PC, if you prefer this. That's usually done in bigger control rooms. You have PCs like 4 screens, you have standard PC just running an HMI screen. Just you can do that. That's called the runtime. Not going to do that for now. You need a specific license for this. So what's left here in the little overview is switches and buttons. So what I want is in my manual mode. In my manual mode, on the left here I can select screens, right? On the left I can select screens and manual mode. This is going to change everything that's in my manual mode screen. So I can basically, if I click now here on manual mode, and properties, in general, I can find manual mode. So manual mode, hello world screen, exclamation mark. So you can see this text changes, and down here in the properties, this is just, you can change the appearance. This is, if you've ever used PowerPoint, if you've ever used Word, it's pretty simple to understand. I'm not going to explain that right here. But you can change the color, for example, you can change the shape, you can change the font, you can do everything that you want with this. But I want to add switches and buttons. Those are controlling PLC bits, PLC tags. So if I add a switch, this switch can be seen really in the runtime, in the on the HMI, right? This switch should control, for example, a cylinder. If the switch is active, cylinder extends. If the switch is not active, cylinder retracts, right? You click on the switch, boop, doop, click it again, boop, boop. So this can be done with just controlling PLC tags, or to make it a little bit more sorted, I'm gonna, in my main PLC, I'm gonna add a new data block. I'm gonna add a specific data block that should control, that should only be accessible from the HMI, so only be written from the HMI and read out from the PLC. I'm going to call that HMI data, I have no idea. English is always confusing. So HMI data, and I want one that's called extend cylinder 1. Right, that's the first cylinder in our system. I have no idea. That's just an example how to use this, not exactly with our system, because that would be too much effort right now. So, and the second one would be vacuum on. I'm going to save those. And those are just Boolean values, right? Just Boolean values, and I can use those bits now in my, I can link those bits into my HMI. So this switch that we created right here, in properties general, you're going to find a process, a tag that is connected to it. So this should be responsible for cylinder extension, right? So let's have a look. Tag, and if I drag and drop this here, boop. Now this bit on my HMI, on my PLC, is controlled by this switch on my HMI, right? That's it. That's basically it. And now I can change the label here. I can say in on state would be extend cylinder, meaning if this switch is an on, this bit here, this single specific bit is going to be set, meaning it's a 1. If it's an off position, it's going to reset, meaning it's a 0. It's a logic 0. So this is basically what the system does, right? The HMI just writes and reads bits here on onto the PLC. So let's have a look why I didn't write. Usually need a quite strong PC for this. My PC is strong enough, but sometimes it's just still annoying. So, you see this? Now it's on the button itself. I could switch the format of the button. Meaning I could also put it with graphics. I could make a switch with text, but this switch here right now is okay to use. So, second thing I need to show you would be buttons. Here we also have buttons. Buttons, they work a little bit different. You do not link them directly to a bit. You control an event with it. So if you, for example, click on the button, click, right? Click, it would activate, it would set a bit. You can do that. If you want to set a bit, if you press it, boop, set the bit, boop, 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 and reset the bit when you release it, boop, that's possible. Those are called being called events, right? I'm going to call this button extend cylinder. If you press this button, I want this bit to be set to 1 at extend cylinder. I'm not doing best practice right here. Careful, I'm not doing best practice. It's not pretty. It's just the screen layout is shitty and it's not pretty. I just want to show you how it works. So I select the button and I go to events. Here I have the different ones. For example, click, right? Click, or press, oh, release, and so on. We have different events, event listeners. So now I want to add a function on a click event, meaning I want to add a function. And this function, I hope this goes on top of the other window. Yes. We could now start an alarm. For example, red light goes on and here there's an error or something. If this button is pressed, we could start a recipe. We could go into another screen, for example, into the automatic mode. We could log in a user and so on. But what I want to do is I want to edit a bit and I want to set a bit. And I want to set a specific bit. Vacuum on. That's now a little bit confusing, right? Vacuum on. Because I wrote extend cylinder. That's the problem. Right now this bit is linked and I want to not extend a cylinder with this. I want to vacuum on. So, okay. Right, vacuum on, vacuum on. I want to have another push button here, another push button like this. Another push button. This push button should turn the vacuum off. There we go. So on this push button, I want an event, also a click event. So I want pretty much similar to the vacuum on. I want a click event, and on the click event, I want to make a guess, not to set the bit, but to, whoops, reset the bit. Now I clicked wrong, reset the bit. This bit. And if I click on those, what I did so far was just dragging and dropping this here. I could again drag and drop this, but I want to show you the logic behind. The PLC, the PLC has a communication with the HMI, right? Has a communication with the HMI, and whenever we control a bit on the PLC, the HMI creates a tag on itself, right? It creates a tag in its own memory, and it can only control this tag. It cannot control the PLC tags. It can only control what it's in itself and then send those bits. So we can now basically select this vacuum on bit here, or we could also go again to our PLC and say this vacuum on, which is pretty much the same thing because they already have the communication. So this is how buttons work. That's already it. If I press now on this button, the vacuum is going to be turned on. If on this, vacuum off. Nothing else. if I press this 10 times, the vacuum is still off. If I press on this, on the switch, it always one click retracts, the second extend, retract, extend, retract, extend, and so on. So that's a little difference between buttons and switches. So those things do not do anything yet, right? They just set and reset bits. They are just controlling those bits right now. Those bits are in data blocks. Those data blocks you can use in your PLC program. So how you use data blocks inside a PLC program is not topic of this lecture. It was already topic, I think, in lecture 2. I hope it was lecture 2 of this whole series. But so far for the HMI controlling, the HMI is now a little bit would be just playing around, finding a good layout for you, and then linking all the bits, right? Creating all the bits you would need, and then linking them into your linking them first to the HMI, and then working with those in your program. How that works, this is up to your programming style, right? I cannot control your programming style. You already learned how to use those in an earlier place, so I'm not going to explain that again here. If you have any questions, just leave a comment or write me an email or whatsoever. If you liked the tutorial, just click on the little like button, and I'll see that I can do more if you want to, or just leave a comment if you want to see another tutorial on something else. I'm always open, and I'm always glad if I can help. But that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and see you back next time, and thank you for your attendance to this lesson.